Hi everyone, it's Quickie Baby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and hot from the super test is the first ever Italian tank destroyer. This is the SMV CC-64 Vipera, and this thing looks like an absolute bizarre enigma coming to World of Tanks, possibly, but remember, everything that you see in the video is subject to change. This vehicle has a semi-traversable turret, great frontal turret armor, good frontal hull armor. It's not particularly fast. It's meant to be some kind of breakthrough pseudo heavy tank destroyer, and it has an autoloader to boot with 2,000 damage per magazine. But it has an 8-second intra clip reload. When I saw this, I thought surely it's an auto reloader and it can reload the shells one by one, right? Wrong. This thing is a regular autoloader, at least as it stands. 32 seconds to be able to unload? Outrageous. Anyway, you know what? To get a better idea of how this vehicle performed, I've put it all into an Excel document. So let's see how this vehicle stacks up compared to the other Tier 8 auto-loading tank destroyer, the AMX AC-48, and also possibly the best Tier 8 tank destroyer, and also a breakthrough super heavy frontal armored tank destroyer, the TS5. So immediately we notice that the Vipera has a 120mm armament, a lot like the other two vehicles in this comparison. All 400 alpha damage on their standard rounds, 515 on their high explosive rounds, but take a look at the penetration of the Vipera. 220, that's not good for a tank destroyer. That would be mediocre, I'd say, for a heavy tank these days in 2022 for Tier 8. Never used to be. And it definitely pales in comparison compared to the AC-48 and also compared to the 248mm of penetration the TS5 will have. Its gold pen is also very lackluster at 264. Awful compared to the AC-48's awesome 325 and the TS5's fairly decent high explosive anti-tank rounds. One area that the Vipera does do well, however, with regards to its penetration, is its high explosive pen. At 120, it gets really nice HESH rounds, or should I say the high penetration, high explosive rounds. This will allow you to be able to deal 2,500 damage per magazine if you can find real squishy targets. But yeah, good luck trying to reload for 36 seconds to be able to get those high explosive rounds in. It's not a... Maybe you could... Actually, you probably could with intuition. That would be very interesting on this tank, to be able to reload and then go after two Borasks at the same time, which in theory you could do if you maybe rammed one a little bit, or you got a fire or a big high roll on your two shells. The thing that is absolutely bizarre about this vehicle is while it gets that big old magazine with 5 rounds in it, 8 seconds intra-clip reload, meaning that to be able to burst out that 2,000 damage, it's going to take you 32 seconds. That looks awful compared to the AMX AC-48's 1,200 damage in 5.4 seconds off the first shot. But considering this vehicle actually has a very nice reload speed for its entire magazine of 36, that actually means that this thing's damage per minute is not that bad at 1,765. But it's literally going to take you over a minute from the tank being empty to reload and then to unload all of the shells. It's just such a bizarre concept. Now, where is this strong? Well, this is going to be strong because if you manage to get that one-on-one engagement against maybe a heavy tank, or you can manage to finish off a heavy and then push on and finish off another maybe slightly lower hit points tank afterwards, yeah, it's going to basically be as if you were playing a TS5. Now the TS5, its base reload is 8.5. Now let's put that into perspective for a second here. The Vipera has an 8-second intra-clip reload. The TS5, without a gun rammer, without vents, without brothers in arms, and without a premium consumable, has an 8.5-second reload. But it has an endless magazine within that regard, and it will never have to do that 30-second reload that the Vipera will after it fires all of its shells from its magazine. What an absolutely crazy concept. Now, take into account also that you can pump up that TS5's reload, and you can almost get it down to like the 6.5 second mark, which means that the TS5 is much better at burst damage, even though it's not an autoloader like the Vipera is. Such a bizarre thing. I have a feeling that Wargaming might have to lower that intra clip a little bit down to 6 seconds, or alternatively they could make this thing an auto reloading tank destroyer which would be a very interesting prospect. And I think that that's why we currently have these statistics on the super test, that they're going to trial it in this form and then maybe trial it as an auto reloader as well. And if they did trial it as an auto reloader, even if it had that long intra-clip reload, it could actually be really interesting. So now let's move on to the gun handling. Awful accuracy, just as bad as the TS5, pretty much worst in class at tier 8 tank destroyer. 2.7 seconds aim time, not good at all, not like the reactionary 1.8 on the TS5. 10 degrees of gun depression, however, is lovely on the Vipera, which will make it very flexible on a ridgeline. The vehicle's turret traverse speed is 20 degrees a second, which makes it worse than the AC-48 in the TS5. But keep in mind that those two tanks can only turn 10 degrees to the right and 10 degrees to the left, whereas the Vipera can do 45 degrees to the left and 45 degrees to the right, which is the same as the FV215B183, for example. That makes this thing a very flexible tank destroyer, not like a T-28 prototype, for example. Not nearly as good as a Scorpion or even an Su-130 PM, but still 45 degrees to the left and the right is flexible, and you're going to be able to add that on to the traverse speed on the tank to quickly be able to re-engage vehicles towards your left and your right. This vehicle's got really interesting dispersion values when it's moving, and that is that it's horrible at 0.25, pretty much worst in class dispersion when moving, but great when you're only turning the hull and great when you're only turning the gun, but not nearly as good as the TS5's turret traverse there. That means that the Vipera, as long as it doesn't actually kind of go forwards or backwards, will actually not really have very much bloom on its gun, and it will allow it to be able to engage rapidly. But as soon as you do have to like chase down that tank that's maybe trying to run away from you or pull backwards to be able to get away from something that's trying to pressure you that maybe has more DPM than you, even though you're an auto loader, then you are going to really struggle with the accuracy on the tank. Let's talk about the mobility of this vehicle, and it's really not very good news. It is significantly faster forward than the TS5, able to go at 36 compared to 26, but its power to weight ratio is awful at 11.7. That means that this thing is going to struggle to be able to get around when you consider that its ground resistances are barely any better than the other two vehicles in this comparison. And the hull traverse speed on the vehicle at 26 is again not particularly wonderful. Now, of course, tank destroyers, once they get all the field mods, do massively increase their ground resistances and their traverse speeds accordingly, so it will definitely improve the mobility of the vehicle, but still, the TS5 can do all of those things as well. Okay, so most tanks that have this kind of a power to weight ratio but still weigh 51 tons, yeah, they usually have some armor going for them, and yeah, the Vipera is no exception. 210 millimeters of frontal hull armor with 100 on the side and 50 on the rear makes the hull of this tank a very chunky thing. You're going to be able to side scrape against anything, and even if you get hit in the side when you're over angling against lower tier tanks, it's really not going to work. And this is darn decent protection for a hull. Makes the AMX AC-48 look poor. However, the TS5 makes this thing's armor look poor with 260 on the front and 100 on the side. However, this isn't the highlight of the Vipera's armor, and that is because it's got 275 millimeters of turret armor and 160 millimeters of side turret armor. That means that this thing kind of will play a bit like a T110E4 with regards to how its turret works at tier 8. I think it's going to be incredible against anything apart from higher tier vehicles firing gold at it, or maybe some tier 8s. Tier 6s and tier 7s are not going to be able to go through this thing's turret, irrelevant of what gun they are packing. And there's going to be so many tier 8s and even quite a lot of tier 9s that are just not going to have a chance against this thing's frontal turret armor. Of course, we can't see on top of the tank and we don't have any screenshots available, so I have no idea whether there are going to be weak points or not on top of the vehicle. If there are, then it's obviously going to be at the degradation of the Vipera. If there aren't, well, this thing is looking like it could be a bit of a behemoth on a ridgeline. And when you can kind of play that assault tank destroyer role with your hull armor, and you can also work your turret as well, yeah, it's definitely an exciting tank within that regards. To add on to this, you've got 1,400 hit points, which gives you a durability advantage massively over the AC-48, but not as nice as the TS5. One thing that sucks, however, is this vehicle's 360 meters view range, which means that you're probably going to end up having to take coated optics on this tank with a good crew inside maybe the scouting slot that you unlock from the field mods if you want to be able to spot your opponents at decent distances. But remember, this vehicle is slow and it's got 0.44 accuracy, which means that you really shouldn't be sniping your opponents with this tank. This thing is possibly one of the most complicated tanks I've ever had to review. I guess it's a bit similar to the Caliban within that regards. It's just so darn different to anything at its tier that, you know what, I think it's very interesting. If it was to go into the game like this, I really can't see that it would be overpowered. It would be really annoying to get caught by one on a ridgeline. It'll be really annoying to basically have to try and bait the Vipera into firing out its shells, and then you can try and take advantage of its 30-second reload. But all in all, I just have no idea why somebody would choose to play this when you could really play a TS5, apart from having that kind of gun depression over a ridgeline with 10 degrees. I think for the most part, most people are going to do a lot better with the TS5 with a gun rammer, vents, and a turbo, or gun rammer, durability, and a turbo. And while the TS5 will still not be quite as quick as the Vipera, it's going to have really a much better hull than the Vipera will have once it gets into combat, and more importantly, actually have DPM. It will be able to do damage, whereas the Vipera is going to be just doing this little bit over time against its opponents. It's just going to be a little bit awkward. I guess when you think about it, to have such a flexible tank that can still have kind of the rate of fire of a T28 prototype, how can that be bad? But that's really how I think this thing is going to be. It's going to be a lot like a T28 prototype, but I didn't want to add the T28 prototype into this comparison because really, is that going to get anyone excited? And I think that's really the conclusion to the video. This tank, it's nothing really to get too excited about at the moment, unless, apart from it just being so different. Maybe you just want to have something super different to play. Maybe something that you want to just take out onto the battlefield and just hold down your W key, do your 2000 damage and move on to another tank. But I have to admit, as somebody who absolutely loves Italian tanks and absolutely loves the fact that they have auto reloaders, which is the speciality of the Italian vehicles, and I do very well with them personally, I'm kind of a little bit disappointed. I was hoping for a little bit more from Italian tank destroyers, and while Wargaming has in no way confirmed that Italian tank destroyers are going to the game, at least that to my knowledge, but correct me in the comments down below if you know otherwise. Yeah, I'm kind of excited by the Vipera, but I'm also a little bit disappointed with just how clunky and cumbersome it seems like it's going to be. But also still really annoying to have to try and dig one out. If I'm playing a T29, yeah, good luck, Chuck. It is not going to work. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, remember this is all super test stuff. There's no guarantee this vehicle's going to go into the game, and everything is subject to change as the characteristics are not final. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this breakdown. If you did, give the video a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about the Vipera's statistics. Do you think it looks awful? Do you think it looks incredible? Does it look like your dream tank? Does it look like a nightmare? What do you think about the fact that Wargaming have given this thing 8 seconds intra-clip reload while still making it reload for 36 seconds? How would you make this thing an auto-reloader without making it just outrageously overpowered? Or do you think that Wargaming could just take these statistics and turn it into an auto-reloader and it would kind of work out? And I've got a funny feeling that that's what they're kind of trying to go for with this tank. I think that they could have this as like the best reload speed when it's fully loaded, and then maybe it progressively gets 1 second worse for each shell that you go into the magazine. Wham bam! First auto-reloading tank destroyer. That'd be an interesting one, right? Anyway, that's it for today, ladies and gents, boys and girls. Hope you enjoyed. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.